We've got Life is Now in Session, and then Little Son says Make Today Amazing, that little one.
Life
Then
is in life is in session, man.
yeah, it doesn't really pause, does it?
Nope,
So
nope.
that's kind of what I'm here for is when people feel like they just want to pause. It's like, well, what can we do trauma wise to get rid of some of those flashbacks and other things? So
I want to talk
please.
a little bit about Mother's Day. I think that
Yes.
comes up a lot for folks.
It does. Yes, absolutely. So definitely, let's talk about that. What are your thoughts on what helps people navigate anniversaries or holidays? Because that's a perennial thing. People face the anniversaries and it puts them into kind of a lot of memory, very vivid memories. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, or they have a super complex relationship with mom or have become moms of their own with or without their own mothers here on the planet. And so I think it's a mixed bag. I have held an event that's called Unmothered Mother's Day since 2018. I always do something before the day. And very early on in my work, it was just peer guided before I stepped in as a grief coach. I just did it because the day really sucked for me. It was awful. And I thought, how can I, as someone who wants to share the day with my children, but I have lost my own mother. Where can I put these big feelings? And so I just thought I'm going to
Yes.
gather with others in community and sort of take back some of the energy that felt really hard and really heavy for me and do something before Mother's Day. So that's when I created Unmothered Mother's Day. And that was for people who were estranged from mom, had lost a mom, had fertility issues, wanted to become a mom, had chosen never to become a mom, had difficult relationships with mom, for anyone and everyone who had identified as unmothered for any reason or any season. And we just started joining together and showing up just as our whole self this year live in New York, which I think is so amazing, and in person. But I think the biggest, I guess, the permission that you can give yourself is meet it any old way you want. It's a Hallmark holiday. Give yourself permission to reframe it in any way that feels right for you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant suggestion. I think if you know it's coming and you know it's going to be difficult, whether you're on bad terms with your mother or she passed away and you were on great terms or a little bit of both where there was ambivalence and she's not there for whatever reason. It's good to know yourself. It's good to know what your emotions are likely to be and then plan accordingly. Engage in some social support. I mean, I couldn't be happier to hear you're doing that kind of a group for people. That's something that many people would benefit from. I think if people have a faith community, that's a direction to go. Your friends get together, do something fun, or if you want to make it distracting, that's great. If you want to honor the loss and have a time for that and then go into something fun, I think that's a great way to teach your brain that you don't have to do either or. You don't have to wallow and you don't have to repress because we get into trouble when we repress and we are inauthentic with ourselves and disingenuous. And then we get hit all at once by big reminders and typically sight, sound, smells, mental images, things that come up. So we have to kind of have a foot in the past and a foot in the present. Just like when we're coping with trauma and navigating it, like honoring, yeah, this happened and it wasn't great. Grief, even though it happens to everyone at some time, it is very exhausting and overwhelming. So I think planning for that and being aware is just one of the biggest things that you could do. It's the skill of other skills. It's the insight about yourself and how you can navigate without being swept up in it. And that takes practice. I think people have to learn their limits. How much can I sit in the grief before I need to really go do something else, go exercise, change my body temperature, engage in really practical skills and strategies that get your mind into something else by force. If you like the sauna, if you like cold temperature, or that shocks you out of something. I mean, at that point, we're using dialectical behavior therapy skills of changing your temperature and changing sensation to ground you. So I think that you'll get a lot more mileage the better your support community is.
Yeah.
And I wish more people had better support communities. I think you're doing your part in that, and therapy can play a role, but it certainly isn't the same as people that you can mutually share with. Therapy's supposed
Yeah.
to be one way. Yeah.
I don't think there's really anything better than sort of that moment where it's sort of a wisdom exchange, if you will, where you show up for something and someone says, you hear something in their story and you're like, oh gosh, I immediately don't feel alone. That doesn't mean any of
Yes.
us has the exact same experience, but even knowing that someone just thinks the day is tricky when the whole rest of the world is like flowers and gifts and Hallmark cards, and you feel like you're missing out or not wanting to lean in. I love what you just said about know yourself. This is an exhausting 360-degree somatic experience. And so you might be feeling something that you can't even name right now, but it could be because it is ubiquitous and everywhere. I know that the week before Mother's Day is real heavy for me. And 30 years after the loss of my mom, I did a book signing yesterday down near where I grew up. And I hadn't been there in so long. And I made sort of an agreement with myself that I knew the streets and the sites were going to be familiar, and just getting on the Garden State Parkway might bring up something. And I talked to my sister and I said, I think I might go to the windmill, like this place that my mom loved to go, and also to take us like a place of her childhood that was like, it's like hamburgers and hot dogs and these crinkle fries, and like a place she really loved as a kid and then turned us on to it. It was sort of like our little spot. And then also, I had not been to her graveside in years and years and years and years. My mom was like, yeah, my mom was someone who didn't really believe like in going. She used to tell us, I don't think grandma is there. Like for her, that wasn't like really her place where she remembered her mom. She was more in like
Yeah.
experiential things. And so I've kind of feel like she wouldn't want us to, but at the same time, I always felt like there was something lonely and I was too close not to go. So I went yesterday, and yeah, it was beautiful to be there. I like all these little pink flowers from the neighboring tree fell on top of the stone, and I kind of cleared them away and put some little fresh buds from the tree on top, and it was really like this cherry blossom tree, and it's very traditional to put a stone that shows that you've been there. And so I got found these two little white stones, one a little bigger than the other. And I was like, this is one for me and one for my sister. And I went also, my mom was a realtor, and we lived in many houses in the same town. I visited all of our houses. I just went by and took a picture. 41 Robin Court, 26 Wallace Road, 33 Andover. Oh, look at that. Once a Jersey girl, always a Jersey girl. I love that, Geraldine, for sure. Grew up playing mean game of skee ball on the Long Branch boardwalk. I love that. I love that. Yeah, we're always like even connected by that. I think, where we grew up means a lot to us, and it can bring up a lot for us. So I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
Yes.
There is something about being just, I knew I was going to like crossing over into the state itself, even though I live in New York and it's not far. It just felt like this connective tissue. And I thought to myself, wow, it's the week before Mother's Day, and I'm going to go do this.
I think that's spectacular. And as a therapist, things are so contextual, and what one client can do, what an individual can do is different than what the next person can do. And I
Yeah.
think what people have to recognize, like, so for me, I think that's a beautiful memory. So in EMDR therapy, trauma work in general, people can create very positive anchoring memories and things where they felt safe or there was significance or they had great self-esteem, like something like strength, wisdom, things like that, that they draw on the inner strength and wisdom and safety. Something like that, where you have a grief moment where you engage in a kind of almost a rite of passage, right? And you put some beautiful flowers, you get white stones, you integrate that into your larger experience and have kind of something you can look back on. I think a lot of people would benefit from that, almost a useful grief memory that means something significant to them. And I don't think everyone's ready for that, but I think if they are, that's a really beautiful way to commemorate something in a way that says, okay, I'm moving on, but I'm reminding myself what this person meant to me. I think what you've done is created so many great rites of passage and ways of conceptualizing grief for people where they can stay among the living and
Mm.
commemorate the past in tangible ways. And that really shocks people into the present in a beautiful way where they're like, okay, I'm here, I'm living. And that doesn't mean I can't dignify the past. I can just do it in this way that shows how I'm interacting with it and I'm alive. It's paradoxical. Like you do
Yes.
these things that help you be more alive while honoring your lost loved ones. It's a really interesting.
I love the way you frame it too. I feel like somehow it also took a lot of the weight off, like what will next week be like? What will it feel? And so all of a sudden it dawned on me that we were in that week. We were in that week where there's some heaviness for me. And I've also come to exchange Mother's Day cards with folks that are having a hard time. Post on my social media. Is this hard for you? Send me a note. I'll send you a card. And other people in my community ask to be senders and they will send a card, like this whole like a little exchange that we do every year. So when people say like, what can I do for a friend? Like, go ahead and send them a card. Like, I know this day is hard for you. Go ahead and send them something. And I think I've just tried on different things. Mother died 30 plus years ago, and I still figure out what's right on any given year. But for me, it feels like it takes some of the energy and the anxiety out of the unknown. And like you said, gives me back a little bit of my power, some beautiful memories. Like I can frame it in a way that it lives in my body that feels more safe and more like I have control over what's coming.
Yes, I love that. It's a great way to put it. There are some forms of control that are really adaptive. I mean, controlling your what how you instill significance in something, what meaning you place something is what we all get to decide. It's interesting because believing that you can influence your outcomes or having an internal locus of control, in other words, LOCUS, associated with resilience.
Uh,
So making that meaning through gratitude practices are really useful as well. And so I think where we lose people understandably is if we push it too early, and I know that's not at all what you're about or me. When people are able to move through some of the grief and adaptively let go and say, I'm not forgetting, I'm just gonna cut some of the emotional threads that really trigger me on trauma or grief. You can do something for grief specifically that allows you to say, I'm glad that I had this person in my life, and here's what I want to remember about them.
yeah. I like also that I've always you've talked to me about EMDR lots where we like have a traumatic experience and we reframe that. But I love that you said that we can also attach to like something wise and wonderful and filled with safety, like putting ourselves back there. I like choosing an intentional practice, even if you are not, doing an EMDR session with Jeremy or your therapist. I love the idea of framing something that feels good to you, where you're putting yourself in a place of wisdom, safety, a beautiful memory. Like even picking a card and sending it to her anyway. What would you tell her today? Can you invite her into like some things that are going on that feel like really good that you want to tell her? Like write the card, or maybe write yourself a card. What would you say to you if were sitting beside you, sitting down with you about being a mom, mothering? It doesn't always have to be about your mom, but it can be about you. There's a beautiful new book coming out called Rewrite the Mother Code. I think there's so many. Yeah, it's so good. I'm going to connect you with Dr. Gertrude because I think you guys would really hit it off. She talks about all these societal norms and things, and I feel like Mother's Day of all the things, right? It makes us feel like we
Yeah,
show up one way, a certain way. I say give yourself permission to show up in a way that feels honest and true to you. Let that be your guide. What do you want to do? I often say you can ignore the day. You can completely reframe it. And I've done that on many days. In the past, I used to sometimes split the day. When my kids would want to celebrate me, I would say, you know what? I'm going to use the morning and I'm going to like go do an activity I love, maybe go to the flea market or, like whatever that is, or a walk or whatever it is. And then in the afternoon, I could show up in a way that felt like my energy could meet what they wanted of me, right?
man. Yes. That's really well put. Gosh. I mean, one of the big kicks that I've been on is that when we try to do everything at once, we do nothing well. So when people are always with their work phone, right? Or which is your phone at all now with your email. So connected to like what happens is you don't rest well if you're thinking about work. And then if you have your phone as a distraction tool when you're working, you don't work well. So you don't work well and you don't rest well. They're bleeding into each other so much. And we don't keep our energy and our time as well. We hear about time blocking, but we don't hear about energy blocking as much. Actually blocking off and saying, here's what I have the space
Yeah.
for today.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I tell people if you have extreme anxiety, we can reprocess it for one. We'll talk about that. But then also give yourself like 5 to 10 minutes to think about the what ifs and then really say, I'm going to hold the rest of that over till the next worry time tomorrow and just start blocking it out and really looking at your time together is important. So, I mean, excuse me, your time as important and everything doesn't bleed into everything else.
I love energy blocking. I love that idea. It takes a lot of energy for us to in grief, but it also takes a lot in anxiety. It takes a lot of feeling
Yes.
hurted. In order to replenish ourselves, it takes a lot as a caretaker. So many of
Yes.
us are caretaking right now. How can you,
Yes.
yeah, time block your energy? That is really beautiful. And that feels less about productivity and more about how can we feel whole and sound and peaceful and show up as our truest self. I love that because some of it is so about our productivity and how we can do more and do more and do more. And just the idea of work phone, for goodness sake. There are apps now where like people are like blocking off their phones and blocking social media. A lot of my writer friends have like blocks on their computers so that they can just write without interruption. It's hard.
Yes.
It's hard. It's hard.
Absolutely. I mean, you hear about like the Hemingway writing
Yeah.
device. I've heard of that one. It can be useful to just experiment a little bit at a time. I mean, so I hear about fasting. I'll hear about people experimenting with like 4 hour fasts and working their way up to a day, and then maybe even 48 hours if you really want to go for it. I mean, in our world now, that's a lot. So I would say a very similar approach to dopamine fasting can be very helpful, or even anxiety fasting. I mean, if that's such a thing, where you have the urge to check something, and end that suspense and saying, no, I'm not going to check that notification now. I'm going to
Mm.
keep doing what I was doing. Even if I'm a little distracted, I'm going to try to push away. And because I was reading, so there's somebody named August Lamb, and she's a very interesting writer who is on Substack. And so it's August, like the month, Lamm. So she is an anti-tech activist living between London and New York. Well, actually, we should like me and her have a conversation if I can get a hold of her because she's not online. She'll post something, but then be offline. And like I was in a group that interviewed her, and when she joined Zoom from like a feature phone, not a smartphone, by calling the number. You know how you do
Wow.
that thing.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting. And so she had talked about like the loop of you want to check your phone and you're holding up against it, but you're upset about it. You think, well, it's quicker to just check it than to think about checking it. And I would say that's addiction that we all have faced with smartphones. It's just so ubiquitous, as
Mhm.
you said about like grief and other things. So what we have to do is say, okay, well, I am gonna die on the hill today of going through that cycle of saying it is worth it for it to be upsetting that I'm not checking it now. Because eventually you go over that hump, like with trauma reprocessing, where it's the worst it gets and then it goes down. People miss that element. And that's with withdrawal as well, is when it's the worst is when you're gonna get through it and come out the other side.
Have to ride. Yeah, you kind of have to ride that beginning, middle, and end. I think what happens is it gets stuck in our bones and our body and our brains when we leave it on the middle. We don't let it ride out until the end. I love that.
Yes, I love that. That idea of it stuck in your bones or like the somatic element. You talk a lot about that. And I wish more therapists themselves, like I think there's now a revolution of it. Like that's the next wave. There was CBT, mindfulness. I mean, that goes way earlier. There was starting with psychoanalysis, then behaviorism and cognitive therapy. Now, you know, now I think the somatic revolution of noticing the body brain connection and how they reciprocally interact. And so what to do to get some of that out, whether it's through reprocessing it, through EMDR or somatic experiencing, where you let your body move the way that you want it to and the way it wish that you wish you could have during the event.
Yeah. Wow. I
That's a
love
big
that.
one for people that are bound up, that, like, didn't get to move during trauma or grief. So
Yeah.
those who are very, very rigid, it's something that they need to release very often.
I have a friend who's a dance therapist, and she works with folks who grieve. And it's many people who sometimes, with gentle movement, breath work, but sometimes for people that really have a hard time with words, right? Like I think we don't always realize, and you have shared with me so many ways in which people can process their trauma. There are so many ways outside of just talk therapy that we don't realize are available. And so I think people show up and they feel like they don't have words for exactly what happened to them, but we know that it can create such dis-ease. And like when I say like it's in your bones and body, I think about where can that go if you're not talking about it? And I love this. Her name is Kelsey Sawyer, and I love her work. And I think when people who aren't even traditionally folks who lean on movement, that when they do this, feel like, I always say writing is movement too. There are so many ways to move things from the inside to the outside. Um, that I think are they're not always intuitive to folks. Like they think we have so many of these rules that and limits and limiting beliefs, if you will, that we've placed on ourselves, like, oh, I'm not a writer. And I always say, if you're writing, you're a writer. If you are. And I feel the same about movement. You don't have to be creating a dance on the stage at Lincoln Center. It's just like if you can just be curious in showing up in different ways and see how they land. I think even in group work, some people are like, well, I don't want to tell my story. Yeah, Geraldine says, my pen, my muse. I love that.
I like that too.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's so many ways to move things through our body and so many modalities that you have introduced me to that I think we can get curious about them.
I 100% agree. As a guy, I think I can be out there and say, and as someone who I would consider myself cerebral, I think those who are in their heads a lot have to recognize there's nothing weird or anti-science whatsoever or woo-woo. Not that that's a bad thing for people who are woo-woo and identify that way. Though about somatic therapy, I mean, people have been dealing with somatic symptoms of trauma for generations. I mean, and the thing is, the less you're connected to your body, the more things will come out that way, not the
Mhm.
less. We can't ignore it. We can't hold it tightly and hope it goes away. So, dance therapy, yoga therapy, there's a lot of trauma informed yoga now that helps survivors connect to their bodies through deliberate, slow movements. Tai Chi, Qigong is a big one. Like that's when I learned about you do expansive movements that are very, very, very slow to the point that it's like ridiculously slow. Well, there's a reason for it. It's very calming and it's really polyvagal informed, I think, with the vagus nerve, activating that response in a healthy way. I mean, humming is one people like too to activate the vagus nerve in a
Chanting.
way that sends your
Yeah.
body the signal you're so yeah, go ahead.
No, just chanting, singing. I always
Yes.
tell people like, make a playlist, sing along in the car.
Yes. Sing along and I love it. And I love that you came on in our talk. Like the title of my talk today was going to be like therapy office hours and trauma and resilience, myths and facts. I think we're covering that together. I love that you came on. I'm glad this time works for you because we're covering the same thing. It's amazing because you know this stuff. So
I have such a love-hate relationship with the actual word resilience for so long.
spill it. Let's talk about it. I love this.
I have I think because I confused people saying I was so strong along the way of grief and loss, that I confused it with resiliency, which I think really is so much bendier and pliable and how we work, you know, in and around hard things than really being strong. Like I think I thought of it as like putting a weight over your head like an Olympian. And I feel now that it's so much more like a rubber band, that I used to say to my kids, when they would be so disappointed by a situation that they expected something was going to happen and then it didn't happen and they had all this disappointment. I was like, can you
Yeah.
can you be bendy? Can you just be a little bit bendy? I used to ask them, can we just be a little bendy? And it was really trying to allow the fact that life was going to throw us um lots of curveballs, and that if we didn't meet it with the idea of being a little bit available for things not always going the way that we had intended, that we were going to be in pain, right? That we were going to suffer, we were going to be in pain. But I was like, I don't want to be resilient. Was, I think that was always my issue with it, that I was like, had a real middle finger relationship with resiliency.
No, you know what? I want to second that and I want to validate it. Not that you needed it, but I think the fact is there's a lot of terms that get thrown around and they become kind of the term du jour, the term of the day, the fun thing. Whether it
Mhm.
was mindfulness for like years, holding space became one. So many different ones, and I think like emotional labor is a
Mm,
term that really kicked up, and I think that's one we have to be careful about because we all kind of do some emotional labor back and forth. If it's we're doing it only one way, that meaning we're the only one giving it in a relationship, that's difficult. But when it comes to resilience, you're not the first person, and I like that. I like that we're talking about it. You're not the first person to say that term is annoying them. Like they don't want to be known as the strong person, which I think, you know what, or because that's like that your identity being that you are resilient against stuff and that it's like you're surviving things that shouldn't be coming your way anyway for people
mm,
who've survived like discrimination or things of that nature. Like, and I think people do deserve to be known for their traits apart from overcoming adversity. I 100% agree with that. I think it's good to know someone has grit. I think we all need some degree of grit that in our current culture, we have to recognize like we can't always get exactly what we want.
mm.
And I think the marketing consumerist culture has really pushed the limits of people believing that they're the greatest thing on earth because you're easy to sell to when you need more and more because you deserve more and more. There's a whole loop there that's just not good for human psychology. I think we have to balance it. Like, are we resilient? Like, we should have a degree of, I like stretchiness. I love the way you described that. Can we bounce back? I mean, that's a synonym for resilience, the ability to bounce back.
Right, right. I think I also see it as like, what are the ways that I feel as if I not only bounce back, but maybe forward? Because I feel like we learn to live with what came on board. And sometimes I think when someone says, you're so strong, it sounds like, well, what choice did I have? But when you get bendy around it and it feels sort of softer to me than hard, I feel like, all right, I can get on board with being resilient. I wrote an essay about it was like an opus to resiliency. It's a book called Resilient AF, and it's a compilation of essays. And uh, Blair Kaplan created this community around resiliency, and it's volume two. But we all wrote from very different angles, and mine was kind of like, I didn't want to be, but here we are.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's so relatable and important. Think it is a little bit like, what are you supposed to say when somebody says, "Oh, you're so strong," and they don't get it? They didn't have to go through that stuff. I totally understand
Yeah.
what you're talking about,
And
and
then
I
I
I,
think,
I dig it.
and then I think when someone gives you that label, let's say, then you think, oh, look, I got so much affirmation and validation for being the strong one, or for being, so adaptive in this particular instance. Then I'm more strong, and I'm not really acknowledging the other parts of the experience that may have the other ways in which I can meet it. Like I'm like, oh, well, society is telling me, like, all these people are telling me, like, look how strong you are. And so I keep being the strong one. And I feel like I didn't have a lot of validation back when in 1993. I feel like nobody was really saying grief or grieving, or they were only telling me, like, oh, you're so strong. Like, look at you. It was really because I was just holding it together and didn't have any tools or rules or mentors. And that's just that was the societal norm. Like, so I think I equated strength and resiliency as some kind of a bundle. But now I see resiliency as the part of me that adapted, that grow. I would never have, if you told me back then, like something good will come of this, I wouldn't have believed you in a million years. I might have even cursed. However, I now see it as part of a superpower.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, what other things do you value that helps to balance that out or that helps you to reconcile like, okay, this is part of my identity. For one, being stretchy instead of it being hard, which I think is which
Yeah.
is awesome. But are there other things that you help you say, okay, well, I'm fine being known as strong because I have this other stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I was my story that I told myself was I'm the sad girl in the room. That if I
Uh,
that if I emoted, that if I really showed folks how I felt, what was happening on the inside, then I would be perceived that would be perceived as not being strong because I was sad and I was bereaved and I was like it was all the things that went along with that and it wasn't allowed, if you will. Didn't feel like it was.
yes.
So now I think, I like empower people. I'm like, even the very tears that come when we cry from grief are like even made of a consistency that makes them roll down our cheek a little bit slower than other kinds of tears so that people can see us crying. It's mind blowing. We're supposed to hold space for one another in that way.
It's exceedingly mind blowing. Keep talking. That was
Isn't it?
wild.
It's just beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yes.
And I was recently, this goes back to community. I was recently told there's a beautiful tradition of like standing and saying a prayer in Judaism that honors a loved one who has died. And once I've just been doing it sort of.
Caught
Yeah, and I've just been doing it for years without really like knowing the why, right? And this rabbi said, "Do you know why you stand?" We were all standing. "Do you know why you stand?" He said, "It's so that the community can see who needs help and who's hurting." And I thought, those traditions, right? Mind blown. Those traditions of the entire community coming to help those who need help in any difficult situation or hardship. I was like, how beautiful is that? And so I feel the same way about those tears that if we were allowed to show up as our 360-degree self in our workplace, in, our exercise class, when someone says, "How are you today?" and is not fine, what would that look like? And so I don't know. I often tell people like my genre of writing is quick, tell the others, because I don't know whether it's because I had no mom or it's just what I'm made of. But whenever I've experienced something that feels like curiously difficult, like even resiliency, I come to the page. Like, let's share it. What does it look like if we talk about this? And I think I was always safer with a pen in my hand or safer behind a screen and hitting send on an essay. So that was my way of processing and making sense of what I was going through. But then I was like, let's see what the let's see what the others have to say about it. And that's why I love these discussions with you, because I think they open up conversations that it's great if we have them in a therapist's office. Even better if we can sort of blow the lid off my story, opening up a conversation, or your feelings resonating with me, and we can just see ourselves as so much more the same than we are different.
Yes, I 100% agree with you. Claudia's asked what that's called. Is it the Kaddish? Is that
Yeah,
what? Oh,
It's
okay.
called it's a Yisker service, and the prayer is called Kaddish. Yeah. And I've even had people who are not religious, you can find it. There's an English transliteration that there is like a traditional candle that burns for 24 hours, and people that don't have traditions, whether it's in their own religion or not. I have people like in my support groups that are like, I'm adopting that. Like I need a tradition of my own. I need something to do on the anniversary of a death, and I love that. I like the idea that we look at all cultures and explore the traditions, because I think in our Western society, especially, I feel like we don't have a lot of cultural norms for exploring. We do them very privately. We don't really do them. I don't know. I have a lot of clients now who like light a candle and send me a picture of it because they're like, I'm going to borrow that. Like we need ritual. We need ritual.
Yeah, boy, you took the words out of my mouth. I mean, so the body keeps the score is
Mhm.
a massive like call to arms for understanding the impact of trauma and beyond taking psychopharmacological agents for it, which no hate when people have to do that. But so Bessel van der Kolk being the kind of European older white guy psychiatrist can't get much more, he couldn't be much more establishment, and then he went on that journey to find methodologies that work. And he found EMDR therapy and has been very complimentary of it. He's discussed this Peso Boyden psychotherapy where I think that one of the founders was named Peso as the last name Pesso, where you work with a group of people, okay? And you have one person take on the role of like a desired mother figure who
Mm.
can witness your pain. Have you heard of this stuff like that
No.
witnessing based group therapy?
Well,
It's
I think
interesting.
we
It's
all,
ritual.
yeah, we all deserve to be. I think being witnessed in your grief validates that you're not only that your grief matters, your person mattered. I think the first thing I say to folks, and I used to say it really quickly so as not to make anybody sad, right? Like
Yeah.
I would say my mom died and like try to get it over with quickly in a conversation if it were to come up. And now I say my mom, Ellen, I say her name. And if somebody tells me they've experienced a loss, I say, tell me their name in a conversation.
Yes.
Tell me their name. What was their name? And it brings even that as ritual, that as tradition, and it seems very small. Sometimes I say, if you don't have anyone to share that kind of a conversation with, start ordering your fast food or your drinks or your, lunch order or takeout in the person's name. And you hear it like yelled out from Starbucks to like your local coffee shop. Like I love when they like, Ellen, your iced vanilla latte is ready. And I get to hear her name and her aliveness sort of fill the room. Try it. It's really amazing.
That's really beautiful. That is a good thing to try. Wow. Okay. I haven't really thought about that. It really is cool to think that way. Yeah, we've missed ritual now. We don't have it. We don't have rites of passage. That's a big problem with development and maturity. It's
Mm.
something that I like to talk about with men, and they don't really have those transitional things. They're not going to college as much. And which is kind of that informal way of transitioning. So that's a good conversation for us to have for sure another time. I mean, this idea of what is it to lose ritual?
Mm.
So branches of Christianity have tradition and ritual, and other branches don't as much. Judaism is very replete with awesome ritual, and I think people could stand to learn from implementing ritual in life. And I think that has, when people toss stuff away and say, "Oh, it doesn't matter, it's not important." Well, when you do that with everything in your life that's a rite of passage or an
Mhm.
internal indicator of something, an external indicator of something internal, we lose it bit by bit. And it's so pernicious because it's easy to just take a few out here and a few out there. And then we're living basically just the bare minimum. And we've lost the things that make us human, really, ironically, are often
Mm.
those things.
That's why I often say, create your own. It's exactly where we started this conversation. How do I choose to meet these hallmark days on the calendar? And yes, rituals transmute energy.
That's Dr. Do you remember Roshanak,
I
Dr.
do.
Roshanak from
I
Clubhouse? That's
do.
who that is.
I
That's her.
see. And
Another
I think
Clubhouse alumni,
exactly.
alumnus.
And
Yeah.
I think, that is grief. It's the energy that needs to move through the body on account of loss is
Oh,
exactly that. And we need to find ways that we can continue to move that energy through the body. So when I say, dance therapy, of course that sounds like movement, right? And what Roshni is saying is yes, the ritual is energy. It transmutes, whether that is the lighting of this candle, whether it is
yes.
the writing or the singing or the chanting or the, gathering in community, sitting shoulder to shoulder in a circle. I do believe that is just a stunning way to look at it. And we need to, that's That's right. That's like what we were talking about when it gets stuck in the middle, when it gets stuck in your
Yeah.
body, and we need to find ways of moving it through. I find, yes, yes, yes. That is, I say, there's something I call a grief tending practice. And people are like, what is that? And I said, it can be whatever you want, but sometimes it's just giving yourself a little time in every day to be with your grief, which might sound like counterintuitive until you try it. I love the idea of like lighting a candle, doing a little writing session, blowing out the candle when you're finished, and creating your own ritual, your own practice. I think there are so many ways that we can do that. I think when you're saying meet the day in a way that feels true to you, it feels like that is ritual.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly right. No, you nailed it. So I love grief tending. That's a great term. I would say people need to do some trauma tending. There's some alliteration there. Really, with their traumatic.
Intuitive, right? It seems
It does.
counterintuitive to like show up for it. Like, why would I want to be with this discomfort or this feeling? I think what I heard you say earlier was so stunning. We can create safety and beauty and like exactly what you said about being there at my mom's graveside. What I heard you say back to me was so beautiful. Like it wasn't really me being in a heap of sad. It was creating this beautiful tradition and safe way of being with that. It did. It honored her, but it also honored me. Really honored
Yes.
me. Placing those flowers, placing those stones, even reading the words to myself, beloved mommy. It took my breath away. It really did. And I took the scariness away from like, what will I feel when I go there by showing up, by doing it?
Yes. What would you do? Yes. So, I mean, a lot of this comes down to the meaning that we make of different memories and how we look back at something. So, when we talk about reconsolidating a memory, it's not that we make a traumatic memory good or we make the grief itself good, but we make our relationship to it different. So the trauma memory becomes, yeah, that was bad. And what can I do now? I have the ability to fight back or to run or to call for help or to know that I'm an adult in an adult body that has choices. And so when you then flex what it is to make a choice, to choose who you date or who you say no to, or what you do when you feel threatened, you can make that a memory of competency. Just like with grief, you can make a memory of honoring when you are around that person that you love and you do something beautiful like flowers or white stones on the gravesite. And you look back to that as that benchmark, that bookmark for the grief concept versus the worst of the worst.
Right,
It's
right.
the memory replacement stuff. Yeah.
Wow, I love that. But I also like the idea of like the little trip I took to visit all the houses. Like there was a lot of beauty in my little trip down memory lane.
Yes, that.
Also, and also just the ritual of going to like, I think about this with recipes too, and foods that were their favorites, or wearing their scent, or or wearing their belongings. I think there's so many things that can bring you a beautiful memory and even reframe a day that might feel heavy, um, or hard. And so even eating the crinkle fries from, the windmill, I felt connected to my mom, as silly as that sounds. I felt
That's amazing.
to her by returning to a place that I knew she loved and treating myself to a food that she loved too. It was so much fun. And I put them in the seat, like the seat beside me. And we were like, I was riding to to the cemetery and eating the French fries on the way. I thought she would lose it. She would love this.
You know what? That's amazing. Hey, speaking of trauma work, grief work, I have to run to an appointment. This was amazing. Let's do it again very soon.
I love the
Yeah, no, I love that this was impromptu and I love the time amount that we spent together here. It'll make for such a great podcast. I'll
input.
edit and push it out. Probably take out the first part of me, like just talking, and then, like, oh, come on, Barry. I'll be like, yeah, let's cut that out and make it just look like we meant to do this.
That's sweet.
And I'll see you soon. If Mondays work for you, that could be a fun time for us to kind of hop on and see how it goes. That'd be a lot of fun.
So, so great. And I love meeting Geraldine. And I really appreciate you helping me reframe some of the ways that I see grief. I think it's great through your eyes. I really do. I love this exchange.
Thank you. You rock. I'll see you very soon.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.